everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. Today's topic is Sensory Challenges 201. I am David Neufeld. I'm the Director of Inclusion at Jewish Learning Works in San Francisco, and I'm very excited to have all of you here with me today. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen so you can all see what I see. And can everybody see that now? Give me a thumbs up if you can. Good, yes. I see a number of thumbs ups. All right. Thumbs ups. Anyway, glad to have you all here. So I am going to go ahead and just start the little slideshow here. And I'm going to just say this. So first thing I'm going to do, as I always do, is go over our agenda for today. So these are sort of the topics that we're going to cover. As I mentioned, this is a 201 class. So this is meant to be for people that have some familiarity with sensory challenges already. Many of you have learned about them with me or elsewhere or have had experience just in your work lives. So that's great. So we're not going to go too deeply into exactly what it is. We will do a little quick review. The one bit of detail that I will go into, because it's something that I didn't know until my own daughter, who is now 5.5, was diagnosed with sensory processing disorder, is that there are actually 3 subtypes of that particular diagnosis. Sometimes the behaviors that you see, you would assume are related to one, but they're related to others. So I wanted to share that with you. We'll go over interventions and accommodations, and then we have a group work thing today. Typically in these, we do some sort of testimonial. For this last one of the series today, we have a sensory challenges action plan, where basically I'm going to put you into groups for a little while. I will share a Google Doc that has, sensory challenges action plan there, and you can either just talk about it or fill it out. On there, a particular kid you might be thinking about, and what, after today's lessons, what you might do with that child. So we're going to get to that, and then hopefully at the end we'll have time for a little more problem solving and Q&A. All that said, if you do have questions during this, feel free to ask. I cannot see everybody when I'm sharing my screen. I can only see 5 at a time. So if you do have a question and you're raising your hand or something and I'm not noticing, please just feel free to kind of call out, and then I will be sure to see you. I just adjusted it so I can see 6. That's a little bit better, but still not amazing. But in any case, and then I'll be able to get your question. The only 2 times that I will not answer a question is, number 1, if it's going to be something that's a little too specific for this kind of setting, where we're getting really too into the weeds about one particular kid, one particular style, one particular something, because while that might be useful for you, it might not be as useful for everyone else on the call. As I said, I am available to any of you at any time to talk about particular specific kids' challenges, via email. You can set up a one-on-one appointment with me or come to the drop-in hours. It's all free. That's one setting time that I want to answer a question. And the other is if we're about to get to it. Other than that, though, anything is fair game. Okay? Sound good? Great. All right, I saw a thumbs up. So I'm going to just take a moment for us to do a little connecting for a second. I know we're all in this. For those of you who are watching this later, we're filming this during the shelter-in-place order, during the coronavirus crisis. Hopefully, by the time you're watching this, we will be out of it or close to out of it. Or at some point when you're watching it, we will be out of it. But we're all doing a lot of things virtually, and sometimes it's important, even more now than ever, to take a moment just to connect. So what I want us all to do is just take a moment, kind of put your hand somewhere on, I like to put it on my heart. You can put it on your belly, anywhere that feels kind of where you feel a connection to other people. And we're just going to take like 2 or 3 deep breaths together and sort of imagine that we're all here in this space together in person instead of just virtually. Okay, so number 1. 2. And 3. I also want us to just take a moment, thank you for that, to kind of just check in with yourself in terms of how present you are here. I know some of us are multitasking while being a part of this workshop. I know we're all at home, we have distractions. My children are here at home, they're outside, they're downstairs, hopefully they won't come in. But I know we all have a lot going on. So just take a moment on a scale of 1 to 7, think about where you are in terms of how present. Number 1 is I've got 6 other windows open, my children or my cat are screaming, and then I'm having to deal with them every 2 seconds. I'm really barely paying attention. All the way up to 7, which is I'm locked in, I'm here, there's nothing else I need to be paying attention to. I'm with you. It's not something we need to share. Just take a moment for yourself to acknowledge where you might be. Okay. So I like to start with these couple of quotes. Neither of these are particularly Jewish, but I liked them around sensory processing. Somebody want to read us the top one? Okay, I see Natalie. Oh, sorry, I got to unmute you. Go ahead.
Oh, the whole thing?
Just the top one.
I hear things more loudly. I see things more clearly. I smell things more strongly. I feel things you don't. I taste things differently.
So
Unknown.
this is an unknown quote from somebody with sensory processing disorder, and I think it's a really interesting way of contextualizing this. Right, we all have sensory stuff that we're dealing with all of the time. Having sensory processing difficulties, challenges, sensory stuff, sensitivities is a part of being a human being. But when you have this disorder, everything is just a little bit more magnified, right? You're hearing more loudly, you're seeing things clearly or more overwhelmingly. Smells can be really difficult. I think about my younger daughter who we went to a one-year-old birthday party at a brewery, and she literally could not stay there. We were sitting outside and the smell was so strong she couldn't stay there. I had to take her across the street because she just couldn't be there. It was too much for her. The rest of us noticed it, but we moved on. I feel things you don't, right? Sensations on our bodies. And I taste things differently. We all have taste sensitivities, but sometimes it's even more extreme. Do those 5 sentences sound like anybody that you know, yourself, kids that you know, things like that, resonating with anybody? Yeah, anybody want to share briefly? You can just unmute yourself and start talking because I can't see it.
Hi, it's Barbie.
Hi, Barbie.
My cousin has sensory processing disorder, and she's always been a really picky eater, but it made more sense when she was diagnosed, like 4 or 5 years ago with the sensory processing disorder and like smells. So having little bits of autism in addition to that, have made it difficult for her family, but at the same time, she's very aware of it's her sensory processing disorder. And there are definitely moments where I'm so proud of her because, like she let me, do something different. So yeah, that's my experience.
Mm-hmm. Well, so you're getting some applause. Nice. Anybody else spark anything? Yes.
I've had the experience at school, like for cleanup time, I have these bells that I ring, and I remember one of the children that like whenever I would ring the bells, cover the ears, or they'd make sure they were, the teachers make sure he's further away because it obviously, it affected him.
Yep. Great. I think I saw Harriet's hand also. You need to, here, I'll unmute you.
But long before that, my son, bless God, is 37. And when he was young, children who didn't fit the mold were just known as bad boys. And I'm so grateful we've come a long, long way. But I remember as a child, noise sensitivity, well, that translated. He's a piano teacher, he's a jazz musician, and he does recordings now. So that was part of his personality. It was also an asset for him. But one thing, and I don't know if we'll get to that, and to this day, he has a very hot body temperature, not really like fever. To this day, on the coldest day, he'll come in with a little t-shirt. And I remember as a child, being an overprotective Jewish mother, I would try and get like a little snowsuit or a jacket on him, and he'd pull it off.
Yeah.
It was not just the heat, he felt closed in.
Mm-hmm.
So there were, as I say, so many little things. I'm glad I'm learning about it now, but there was very little awareness of that 30 years ago,
Yep.
really.
We've come a long way.
That we know this.
Yeah. Anybody else have something they're burning to say? I know I saw one or two other hands. Just call out. We'll take 1 or 2 more quick comments.
Yeah, may I?
You may.
So I think with what's going on, we kind of, all of us have these kind of symptoms lately because we're so aware of our environment right now and who's touching what and who's doing what and who is breathing on what, that I think, it kind of affects everyone in some way and intensify things that were, there before.
Mm-hmm.
Something to think about. I don't know.
Yeah, this kind of situation can bring out can bring those things out, and we're all hyper aware of our surroundings, as you said, in a way that we're not always accustomed to being. You know, how far is 6 feet, right? And do I have enough room on this path to pass, or do I need to move out of the way, right? That's part of sensory processing, is knowing where you start and the world begins, and how do you navigate that. Great, thank you. Would somebody like to read us the Temple Grandin quote underneath? Oh, would someone else want to say something? Sorry. No? Okay. Somebody read us the Temple Grandin quote.
Sure, I'll read it.
Oh,
Oh.
I'll read it, Bob.
Go ahead, Rachel.
Okay, Rachel.
One of my sensory problems was hearing sensitivity, where certain loud noises, such as a school bell, hurt my ears. It sounded like a dentist drill going through my ears.
So I'm guessing that most people here know who Temple Grandin is. She's probably the most famous person with autism to ever live. She's a very well-known scholar, animal scientist, and has written many, many books about autism and sensory challenges, and been very successful in doing so. And she really speaks quite eloquently about her experience. And I put this up there just to underscore how intense these sensations can be, right? This is a school bell. School bell sounds loud to all of us. I'm guessing for most people here, it doesn't feel like a drill going into your ears, right? So that's just something to be aware of as we're wondering why our kids might be having a hard time. So I just think it's, we don't need it. I just wanted to kind of bring that up, because the intensity can be really strong sometimes. And it can be strong at different times. It can come and go, and that's part of what makes it confusing and slippery, right? I see it with my own kid all the time. Okay, so we're gonna, yeah.
Just out of curiosity, I'm just wondering, like, when people do have the sensory disorder, does it affect all those areas, or just some have certain areas, or because, like,
so it can be, so we're about to talk about all the senses here. When you do have it, you can have the sensitivities in one or all of them, or
okay, that's good. Okay.
It really varies. You might, and actually even varies in terms of if you're under responsive or over responsive, right? If something sounds really loud to your ears, that's having over responsive ears, right? It's like too much for you. You have to cover them, right? You might have really over responsive ears, but your body might be under responsive to what's called vestibular input movement, right? Like movement through space. We're about to talk about it, but meaning that you need to move through space a lot more than a typical kid might, because it takes more of that to sort of fill up that sensory cup for you, right? And so that's one of the things, is that you often see kids have different size cups. In the 101 version of this, there's a video that I share, which I can definitely send you the link to. It's a great video narrated by a child with autism and sensory processing disorder, which describes all of this super eloquently and very powerfully, and it's like 7 minutes long. It's a great video. Many of you on this call have seen it already, but if you haven't, I will send you the link. And he talks about that, different cups for different types of sensation. So that's a good question. First, we're going to talk quickly just about the 7. Yes, actually 7 senses. First, of course, we have the 5, which are, as we all know, sight, hearing, smell, taste, touch. Those are the 5 that we all think about, right? We can have a big cup or a little cup for any of these things. It can take a lot of that sensory input to make you feel like you're getting it, or even a tiny little bit and you overflow. So, if you have a little cup for sight, if there's a lot going on in your visual field, it might be really hard for you to focus. Hearing, we just talked about, is a little cup for hearing. Even a little bit of noise can be like a drill going through your head, right? A little bit of noise above the norm. Smell, taste, touch, all the same, right? So these are all areas that we can have sensitivities in, and we can be over-responsive or under-responsive to them. Vestibular is a 6th one. I just mentioned it when I was answering Bob's question. Vestibular input is the sensation of our body through space. It has to do with your inner ear, and it's the feeling that you get when you are running or jumping or swinging, right? And in movement through space. Vestibular input tends to be really upregulating for kids. It tends to get kids very excited, right? Which might be why after recess or some really exciting physical activity, kids have a hard time calming down, right, and settling, because vestibular input really spins you up, up, up. I always think of it like the way you feel when you get off of a roller coaster, right? Assuming you like roller coasters and you're not like sick to your stomach, you get off the roller coaster and you're like, yeah, that was amazing. Let's do it again. So cool. You're pumped, you're excited, right? That's what vestibular input does. The sort of counter to that, which is the 7th sense that we talk about around sensory processing stuff, is proprioceptive input. And that's the opposite. Proprioceptive input is really deep pressure input to your muscles and your joints, right? It's really more the sense of where you start and the world ends, or where you end and the world begins, right? So and proprioceptive input is all the stuff that gives you really good input to your muscles. So squeezes, massages, being wrapped up really tight in a blanket and held, right? Being held on a teacher's lap, right? For example, that's all proprioceptive input. Proprioceptive input tends to be very calming for kids, right? Or for people, human beings, right? The way that you might feel when you get a back rub, right? Or a really good hug when you're upset, right? Or the way that you might feel, when somebody gives you a massage and then afterwards you're just like, oh, I feel so calm and relaxed, it's very, very calming. We use a lot of things. A lot of kids that I know, including my daughter, use weighted blankets to sleep with. It helps with that. And a lot of adults I know actually use them too. It's very comforting. And that's proprioceptive input too. It's all of that stuff on your body, not your body through space, stuff on your body. And proprioceptive input tends to be the antidote to too much vestibular input, right? So when kids are super excited and crazy, often the proprioceptive input will calm them down and get them back to a good middle ground, right? So we'll talk a little bit more about in a few minutes. So sensory processing in general is the way the nervous system receives messages from the senses and turns them into appropriate motor and behavioral responses. That's just a not super fancy, but slightly fancy way of saying we get input from the world, our body figures out what to do with it, and then we respond, right? By whatever it is that we do, right? That's sensory processing, period. Sensory processing disorder, what we're talking about today, is when those sensory signals don't get organized into appropriate or typical responses, right? You might have difficulty responding adaptively to sensations that other people barely notice or just take in stride, right? Classic example of that is like kids with shirt tags, which we're seeing a lot less shirt tags these days. A lot of the labels are just printed right on the fabric. But when there were a lot of shirt tags like that, some kids, it could make them crazy. My daughter, the 5.5-year-old, if her sock is not on in the exact right way where the seam is not on her toes, that's you, Bob, right? She can't deal with it. She has to take it off. She has to adjust it. She can't put her shoe on, right? If the seam is on my toe, it doesn't bother me at all. Right. Same thing. I used to live in San Francisco. I live in Berkeley now. But when I lived in San Francisco, close to the N train on 37th and Judah, it would go by all the time. After a little while, I barely noticed it. One year, I was looking for a new roommate. It was a 3-roommate house. One of them moved. We were looking for someone new. This young woman came in. She was lovely. She seemed great, very nice. She sat down on the couch. We were talking, having the roommate interview. The train went by, and as soon as it went by, she said, "Nope. Sorry, I could not live here." That's all that I would ever notice, and my body won't get used to it, right? Usually, what most of us do is what's called habituate to sounds like that. That's the sort of technical term for just getting used to it, right? It doesn't bother you anymore. You stop noticing it. But a lot of stuff like that, blenders, vacuum cleaners, hand dryers in bathrooms, automatic flushing toilets in public bathrooms that are really loud and go off when you're not expecting, right? We might notice them or just take them in stride. Somebody like my daughter, somebody with sensory processing disorder who has auditory sensitivities, ears get covered or they may not even want to go in the room, right? So that's sensory processing disorder. Was somebody trying to make a comment? No? Okay. Again, if you do, just clearly say, hey, I have a question, because like I said, I can't see everybody. So that's sensory processing disorder. Unusual responses to sensory stimulation, another way of thinking about it, right? And that's all kinds of sensory stimulation, just, something that you're touching, something that you're hearing, something that you're feeling, all that kind of thing. And it just gets it was once described actually by, it might even be by the woman that wrote The How to Sing Child, as a traffic jam in the brain, right? All this stuff comes in and it all gets stuck, right? Doesn't know where to go. Okay, so now there are these 3 subtypes that might be interesting for you to know about, given this is a 201 class. I will, by the way, send you these slides afterwards, so don't feel like you need to write everything down. I know some of you already are, but I will provide them to you, so you'll be able to see them. So sensory modulation disorder is the first subtype. There are 3. As you might guess by modulation, right? Modulation has to do with up and down, right? Levels of things, right? So what sensory modulation disorder subtype is primarily difficulty regulating responses to sensory stimuli. That's the over-responsive stuff and under-responsive stuff. That is probably one of the most common that you would see in the classroom, right? Because things get loud or kids need a lot of, sensory input to wake up, right? Also kids who are sensory seeking, right? Who really seek that out, who really want to get their hands and everything and run and crash into people, right? That might be one aspect of their sensory modulation disorder because the responses are just having difficulty regulating. An interesting thing about these 3 subtypes is you can have 1 or 2 or all 3. It's not like you just get one. You might have some to high level, some to a lower extent, right? But a lot of things that, but this is one kind of category. The next one is what's called sensory-based motor disorder. This one is, I think, a little bit less common. Modulation disorder is the one I see the most, and the one that I think the classroom teachers maybe see the most. But sensory-based motor disorder also is a thing. It has to do with the way that your body kind of is in space and your motor abilities, and it's about your senses and the way that your body makes sense of your body position. So you might have difficulty with balance, you might have difficulty with motor coordination, or the performance of skilled, non-habitual, or even habitual motor tasks. So anything that's complicated, that requires a little bit of extra effort, like drawing, for example, sometimes can be really hard for kids with that because you have to be able to coordinate pretty well. Even playing games. Some games on the playground, right, where you have to kind of look and see and kick and put it all together, right? And you need to be balanced while you do it. Maybe you're in a potato sack race where you've got to stay balanced with another person, right? Or you're trying to do gymnastics and you have to kind of keep yourself balanced, or whatever it might be, right? And that's more that, and that's not necessarily. This is sensory-based motor disorder, insofar as the reason is because of your body is not quite sure what to do in space, as opposed to like I have lower tone in my legs, or my muscles aren't strong enough to support me, or anything like that. It's more about how do I find a center, right? And how do I put it all together. So postural disorder is one of the specific diagnoses of that. That's basically trouble sitting up straight, right? It could be that you sort of lean. It could be that it's harder to hold yourself upright. One of the things that we noticed with our daughter, which we didn't know till we went to an occupational therapist, was she would run a lot and crash into things. And we sort of always thought it was sensory seeking, right, in that first category. We went to the OT, and she said, actually, I noticed that she has trouble with her balance, and she couldn't do kind of a balancing task where she was having to stand on one leg and do something. So she actually thought that maybe part of the reason that she ran and crashed was to compensate for that, right? It's if you're having trouble keeping upright, then the easier thing to do is to run and crash into something, right? It's also to do with the last one that we're going to talk about in a minute, but that's postural disorder.
David?
Yes.
Does that include W sitting?
So W sitting, what Natalie is referring to is when kids sit with their kind of, everyone knows, okay. In case you don't, it's when you sit with your legs in kind of a W shape with your knees in front of you. A lot of kids do that. At a certain point, mostly teachers encourage crisscross applesauce sitting instead. W sitting is, you see more with older kids, especially, you see more with like kids who are low tone, who have trouble kind of holding when you sit in that crisscross applesauce, sitting up straight, holding your body upright. W sit kind of does that for you because it gives you that wide base. With all of this, just because someone does a W sit does not mean that they have postural disorder, but it would make sense if you had a kid that had postural disorder or dyspraxia, which is basically getting your body to do motor movements that you want it to do, and coordinating them all easily, and challenging yourself physically, right? That they might W sit. But just because you see a W sit doesn't necessarily mean something is wrong.
But it does mean low muscle tone, yes?
It can, or it could also mean they're just more comfortable that way. I want to be careful without, as educators, we don't ever want to be diagnosing, right? Well, I would not want you to come out today wanting to diagnose all the students that you're going to go back to in the fall with SPD, but just to know what's out there and to know what some of the signs are, so that if you're seeing a bunch of these things together a lot, right, then that's something you might consider talking to your director about, maybe having a conversation with the parents about whether or not something might be going on. Usually with these things, like with everything to do with development and special education, we're thinking about frequency and intensity, right? We all do all of these things some of the time, right? And what raises our little red flags as educators, clinicians, is when we see kids doing a lot of them most of the time, right? So if you're seeing W sitting and all this other difficulty with balance and other things, then maybe we got something, and it's happening a lot, right? That makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So the last one is sensory discrimination disorder. As that name suggests, it's about difficulty interpreting subtle qualities of objects, places, people, or other environments, right? So kind of the subtle levels, the subtle kind of, differences in things, right? For example, how hard is too hard, right? When you're using your body for something. My 5.5-year-old, she loves to like, come and give you a hug, but what she will do is like crash into you full out, like with her like elbows out at her knees and like hurt you, or she wants to jump on you and she'll do it in a really hard way, on sensitive parts of one's body, right? Not really understanding how hard is too hard, right? How fast is too fast? When I'm moving, at what point am I going to start to lose control and trip and fall and hurt myself, right? Because that happens a lot with kids with SPD. They don't quite know how fast is too fast, and they move faster than their bodies actually can, and then boom, right? So clumsy, right? My younger daughter, you would often think she was clumsy. She's figured it out now. Every time she has a growth spurt, she starts to fall a lot more. But that's pretty normal. How loud is too loud, right? Kids having trouble pitching the volume of their voice, right? Knowing what those levels are. That's sensory discrimination. And our OT actually thought that for our younger daughter, another piece about running and crashing was this discrimination piece, like wanting to have that initial like running and holding, but not knowing how hard is coming on too strong. So we've been talking a lot more with her about, hey, I love that you want to give me a hug, but how do you think this feels to me right now, right? It's too hard. Can you do it softer? Show me how it would be if it was softer, right? And then, but that's a constant thing that we're dealing with her. Right. Our younger daughter gets excited too, but she can manage it. Our older daughter, gets excited too, but she can manage it, and she doesn't have this, but the younger one does. Any questions about any of that?
David, I was just curious, do a lot of people that are diagnosed with sensory disorders also diagnosed with ADHD? I've noticed a lot of the symptoms are very similar.
Yeah, ADHD is comorbid with a lot. Comorbid means occurs with, co-occurring with a lot of things. You do see sensory stuff with ADHD sometimes, mostly for the hyperactive type, right? The primarily hyperactive type or the blended type. With attention, the primarily inattentive type, it's not as much of an issue. But that hyperactive piece, there is some overlap with that and needing to move your body, right, to feel regulated. So that's definitely true. It overlaps a lot with autism. So a lot of kids with autism have sensory challenges, not all of them, but really most of them. There's not a ton of kids with autism that don't have that, but there are definitely some. So you see that, you do see that a lot. But ADHD, it's certainly, especially the hyperactive type, you do see along with some of these sensory challenges. Yeah, to do with regulation and regulating your body's levels of energy, right? Okay, so consequences of having sensory challenges, right? When students are overstimulated, they may become distracted and fidgety when when it's too much for them. They might have trouble focusing, paying attention, or completing tasks. There's an ADHD crossover, right? The attention piece does go along with being overstimulated and not being able to focus, right? Less about the body movement and more about just the I can't pay attention because there's too much going on and I can't focus. Completing tasks. They might stand up and walk around, right? They might act out, right? Lash out at kids, hit, punch, pinch. My younger daughter, when she gets really overexcited and angry, the younger one, my younger daughter, she doesn't modulate through language the way that, a lot of our kids do. And she is very likely to launch herself at you and start pinching and hitting and kicking. And then the second she's calm, she feels really bad about it, right? And she says, I only do it when I'm really upset. My body doesn't know what else to do, right? That's just the way she has to get it out, right? So you sometimes see that when kids are overstimulated or just kind of like their engine is turned up too high. They may also engage in self-stimulation. Yeah? Somebody? No? I keep hearing voices that aren't there. All right, sorry. Engaging in self-stimulatory behavior is something else that happens when kids are overstimulated. We also call it stimming. It's a thing that we see in autism a lot. We talked about on the autism talk here, whenever that was, a couple months ago. But that's just kind of walking around and, tapping all over the place in a way that's not clear what the purpose is, apart from giving, you just doing that to get your own input, right? Your own body input. Anything that's really, kids with autism, if they get overwhelmed, you might see them doing more flapping of their hands, right? Or jumping. A lot of kids, when they get really excited, are jumping up and down. And that turns into a self-stimulatory thing where they're not paying attention to what's around them and they're just jumping and flapping and giving themselves that input because their engines is clocking too high, right? And so they get disorganized, right? It's a way of trying to manage that, not the way that we as teachers or educators would like, but that's what they're doing, is managing that level of energy. Similarly, when kids are understimulated, right? So when they've got a really big cup for some of these sensory things and they need a lot of a particular kind of stimulus to kind of notice it or be aware and engaged with whatever you're doing. Happens in circle time a lot. Kids that just kind of like, check out. They may slouch in their seats, right? When we're bored, that's what we do, right? We slouch, we get distracted, we sort of, that's one thing. When I'm feeling tired, I tend to sit less up straight, lie down during circle time. We see this all the time. Stare off into space, just kind of like appear to just totally disengage and just kind of go blank like this. Right, where there's nothing getting in, right? That happens when they're understimulated. and like our overstimulated friends, having trouble focusing, paying attention, or completing tasks, and engaging in self-stimulatory behavior. In that case, to try to get themselves more engaged, right? We all do that too. I play with my wedding ring all the time. I tap my foot. It makes my wife crazy. Back when I used pens instead of typing everything, mostly, I would chew my pen caps all the time, right? We all do stuff to stay regulated in a sensory way. Just the things that some of our kids do are more obvious and less socially acceptable than the things that the rest of us might do, right? Playing with a wedding ring, no one thinks that's really weird, right? Getting up and jumping up and down and flapping my hands in a meeting, somebody might think that's weird, right? But it serves the same function, right? And part of the deal with how you help with this is to normalize it, especially with kids, and just let it, this is just how, this person stays calm. This is how they stay focused, the same way that you maybe doodle, the way that you like to go and throw a soccer ball, the way you like to have a fidget, right? That's a sensory thing, right? So we see a lot of that. Any questions about that so far? Everybody with me?
Am I not helping? Because I have a child that jumps when she gets very excited. She is high functioning, and sometimes I jump with her. Am I promoting that? Or,
I think you're doing fine. What you're doing when you do that is you're joining with her and you're turning the experience into something that's no longer self-stimulatory and instead becomes shared, right?
Okay.
When you join in and then expand on it, right? So maybe you shape, what I used to do all the time when kids were jumping and flapping is turn into flying, right? Oh, you want to fly? Let's fly.
Yeah.
Crash. Now, and then they come up and they look at you and they jump up and down and they flap their hands to get you to do it again, right? At that point, it's not self-stimulatory anymore. At that point, it's play, right? At that point, it's interactive. So no, you're not doing it anymore. You could also try giving that girl some, proprioceptive input, having her carry something heavy, giving her squeezes, having her come sit in your lap and kind of, relax with you, wrapping her up tight in a blanket, making a burrito or a sandwich or a wrap or whatever you want to call it, right? And see if that also does it. But so you can do both. Yeah. Okay. Interventions. Occupational therapy, I mentioned very briefly. So that is, occupational therapy is a thing. There are occupational therapists who are licensed and registered and do this. There is medical occupational therapy, or occupational therapy for elderly people, which is more about, getting them to, helping them to be able to just function in their daily lives. Occupational therapy is anything that helps you through your daily tasks, right? That's why it's called occupational. Right. So there's such a thing as medical OT when people are in recovery from some kind of an injury or having some kind of medical problem that needs remediation. But this is sensory OT. So for example, a place like Kaiser does not cover sensory occupational therapy. That's just not the way their minds work. If it's not medical, they don't cover it. So all the families that come to me looking for occupational therapy recommendations to have Kaiser, I have to tell them you're not gonna have any look at Kaiser. You got to go private, right? Because it's sensory and it's different and it's pediatric. Right? There's also people that do OT with older people that are in recovery from injuries, as I said. So when we talk about it in this context, it's not medical, but it's sensory. It's usually playful. It involves activities and exercises that are done at a clinic or in the home that are all about kind of stretching and helping kids to learn better how to balance, how to coordinate all the pieces of their sensory system, how to, engage their bodies in ways that they have trouble doing on their own. An OT will do exercises with a child if they're seeing you weekly or whatever. You go to their clinic. Usually there's a bunch of swings and balls and fun things to play with, spinning stuff. And they will do exercises there. They will also often give you recommendations for what you can do at home, right? A lot of parents want that, especially if it translates into trouble sleeping, like it did for my kid, like it does for my kid. You know, she actually woke up last night, 4:40 a.m., was up till 6, right? When she gets kind of overstimulated and excited, her body has trouble calming down and sleeping. And it was really bad a couple years ago when we got her finally diagnosed, right? And then we got a bunch of strategies to help. So it's a lot better now than it was then. So they will give you home stuff too. So that's the thing that is out there for parents. Sensory diet is another one. Sensory diet is what it sounds like. It's providing a variety of sensory experiences throughout the day. Preschool teachers, you all do this naturally. There's often sensory tables. Basically what it just means is making sure there are different kinds of textures, different kinds of activities that engage the gross motor system, the fine motor system, you know, hearing, sight, all those things, providing a variety of sensory experiences to help kids kind of feel regulated. For some kids, it might involve brushing. There's an OT brush, which is like a kind of a soft plastic brush for kids who are a little bit kind of understimulated. You do this brushing protocol where you do this like 5 times, and then you do it over here, and then the other arm, and then the other arm, and it gets the sensory system going. You always have to kind of follow that up with proprioceptive squeezes, because otherwise it can get kids really just riled up. But that's a sensory diet. You're giving them some stuff that gets them a little more excited and some stuff that calms them down, right, to help with regulating. So that's a sensory diet. What else can I do to help you as the teacher? Allow a child to take sensory breaks when necessary. I think this is critical at all levels of instruction. We're pretty good at it in preschool. We're less good at it with older kids. Setting up the classroom environment when we go back to it to minimize sensory challenges, meaning what's on the walls. I've been in some classrooms where it is so busy. There are a million, collections of 28.5 by 11 pieces of paper with art projects, 20 of them here, and 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 things hanging down from the ceiling, and things and things on the ground, and this structure over here, and this over here, right? And it's all done in the name of like creating an environment that's interesting, but for a lot of kids, it is just super overwhelming. I think less is more in terms of that, right? Things loud, crazy. Is there a lot of movement happening in the classroom? Is there a place you can go when you need to move your body, right? That's how you set it up to minimize those challenges. Use sensory tools, things like fidgets, things like wiggle cushions, things like headphones, right? For kids who are sensitive to sound, all sorts of things like that. I have a whole toolkit of them that I think I have given to many people on this call and or trained you on, but you're all familiar with these tools, I think, but that's another thing that you can use and have out. For me, though, really, this goes along with sort of the normalizing piece that I was talking about before. This last point is something that I think is the single most helpful thing you as a teacher can do, or me as a parent can do with my 5.5-year-old when she's making me crazy, right? Is to try not to think of her as behaving badly. Don't think of the child as behaving badly, because that makes you get angry. That makes you get frustrated. That makes you want to correct, punish, discipline, whatever you want to call it, right? But think of them as struggling with something difficult, right? If you can think of that they are struggling with something difficult happening in this environment right now, that will change the way that you think about that behavior, right? You're locating it a little bit outside of them, or at least making it not their fault. Like, I can see your body really needs to move right now, not why are you being so crazy, right? Not calm down, sit down, it's time for this, right? Your body really needs to move. Let's see what we can do about that, right? I can see you really you really want something in your hands right now, you can talk about it in that this is the thing that your body wants, even if your brain knows you shouldn't do it, right? Or that you're struggling and it's hard. It's really loud and that's hard for you. I can tell this is overwhelming. There's a lot going on and it just makes you want to curl up in my arms and disengage, right? And not be involved because it's hard for you, right? As opposed to, hey, sit up, pay attention. Why are you ignoring me, right? None of us say those things. Shouldn't say none of us. Most of us don't say those things explicitly. Why are you ignoring me? Why are you being so terrible? Right? But it's an internal adjustment. How are you conceptualizing it? Because that will inform what you do say, and even more importantly than what you say, how you say it, right? And what you're communicating to them. So that's really important. Recognize that there's a sensory thing happening, and that's what's going on. There are a bunch of other things that you can use in the classroom or in the home to help do some of that externalizing, getting them to think about it. And it makes me think of when I was in college. I took an acting class. I was a professional actor for a bunch of years. And in college, I was taking an acting class. And I had this tendency when I was on stage to lean my head forward, You can't really see on Zoom because I'm not standing up, but I'm kind of sticking my head forward, right? And it does not look good on stage. It's a thing that I think I did because I'm tall, right? You can't see that either, but I'm 6'1.5", right? So, and I was not even aware I was doing it, right? But I had an acting teacher or a director say to me, decided that they were going to say turtle every time I did it, right? Turtle. And then I would know, oh, David, pull your head back, straighten your shoulders, right? So being aware of it is one of the best ways of helping kids to deal with it, especially as they get older. And if you can externalize it and talk about it in some of these ways, that will help them with that. My daughter now can say, I just have really sensitive ears, or my body's having trouble right now, because we've talked about it with her for 2 years, you know? And by the time she's 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, like, she will know what her body needs, right? So especially when you're dealing with older kids, you can ask them, what do you need right now? What helps you calm? What helps you stay focused? And these are all ways of doing it. So this first one is the alert system. It's basically, how is your engine running? This is a visual aid. You don't have to do it with a visual aid, but I like this metaphor because it tends to work for all ages, all genders, everything. We've all been in cars. We all know or ridden bikes. We all know what it's like when things are struggling to go, you know, and going too fast. And we all know what things are like when it's, you know, running too low and not moving, you know, your toy car or whatever. So that's a really nice way to think about it. And you can have it visual, like what's on the screen here if you want. It's just you attach that arrow with a brad to like a little, you know, semicircle, and you can like have them kind of adjust where their engine is. There's lots of other metaphors besides engine. You know, I've heard Winnie the Pooh metaphors. Tigger is too high, Eeyore is too low, Pooh is just right. I've heard animal metaphors, like you know, a cheetah is really high, a turtle is really low. You know, what's the one? Like a dog is just right, maybe. I don't remember what it is. Like whatever it is that works for you, right? There's lots of metaphors you can use to make the kids aware of what's going on and how their body is feeling. You can also use this. This is called the zones of regulation. There's a lot of free materials online. If you just Google it, you can download this or many other things. It's been around for a long time. You can see copyright 2011 at the bottom there. So the zones of regulation is another way of conceptualizing this, right? When you're in the green zone, that's what we're going for. You're happy, calm, you're feeling okay and focused and ready to learn. Yellow zone, things are starting to get a little bit crazy, a little frustrated, a little silly, a little wiggly, and I'm starting to lose control a little bit. And red zone is when, okay, things are out of control, right? Blue zone is the opposite of that. You're sad, you're sick, you're tired, you're bored, you're moving slowly, right? And so when we talk about the zones, it's often, how do we move one level, right? What are strategies that you as the teacher, or that you can help the child do to move themselves one level, whichever way you need them to move? So if they're in the green, you're good. If they're in the yellow, how do you get them back to green? If you're in the red, how do you first get them to yellow and then maybe get them to green, right? If they're in the blue, how do you get them also to green, right? Without going to yellow or red, right? And so it's just an easy way of thinking about it, and color coding makes sense. It's also a little bit related to, you know, traffic and cars, right? Green, yellow, and red. Right? So it works. Kids understand it sort of intuitively, living in the world that we live in, at least when we used to go out in our cars all the time. So that's that. That's just another thing you can use. This is an example of an activity that comes from the zones of regulation to calm down. It's called lazy 8 breathing. Where basically you take this thing, and if you can imagine, since you can't see my finger, but if you can imagine that I'm pointing at the star in the middle, and I'm going up and to the left and breathing in, and around and up to the right, and breathing out, right? It's another version of smell the flower, blow out the candle, right? Right, it's just a way of helping kids learn to breathe. And the figure 8 is nice because it gives them sort of a visual thing, a tactile thing. If you actually print something like this out, have them use it. And that's usually a way to get down one level, right? We all do it. So any questions about that?
David?
Yeah.
Sorry if I jumped in over somebody
Oh,
else.
Rebecca. Hi.
Yeah. I just wanted to, can you go back to the zones for 1 second?
Yep.
Because our preschool's been using these and I love it, and I've been struggling with it a lot. And for some reason, either your layout or your explanation or both together, like I suddenly realized that it's like a continuum, as opposed to like I was trying to figure out, like, why is silly and wiggly in the same category as worried or whatever. And it's not that silly wiggly is the same as worried, but it's on the way to the next thing, and worried is on the way to the next thing, which is the red zone. And
Yes.
like all of a sudden I had that aha moment. So thank you for sharing that with me.
Yes, of course. Yeah, I mean, it's not even me. It's Leah Kuipers. I mean,
Right. Same, Rebecca. It's Barbie. I just wanted to say thank you so much again.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. Yeah, so yeah, it's not about that angry behavior, right? That's not the only way to be in the yellow zone. It's about regulation. It's about how in control are you? How calm are you? Right? We can be in yellow for all kinds of reasons, right? Because we're worried. I mean, because we're tired, right? I mean, tired is in the blue zone, but if that makes us then get a little bit more irritable, right? Then being tired can also make you irritable, which is definitely yellow zone. And then angry shout. I mean, look, we're all, those of us with kids are homeschooling our kids and trying to work at the same time. Like, I'm having some irritation that sometimes boils over into screaming, right? Like, I really try not to, but I lose it more than I'd like to, right? Because it's just hard, right? So part of what I have to do is notice when I'm in the yellow and I can feel my body getting to that point of frustration. I tell my kids I need a break. I go to the other room. I do some lazy breathing, right? Until I can calm myself down. And then I come back in because I know if I stay, it's going to explode in a way that I'm going to regret later and that I don't want to have happen, right? So yeah, it's a continuum, right? So yeah, absolutely. It's just on the way to something else. How regulated and calm are you? How centered are you? Yeah, definitely. And how do we get more? How do we get back? Dealing with anxiety, you take deep breaths, right? And then you change your thought. You try to change your thoughts, right? For kids, that's harder. For adults, that's what we learn to do, right? The destructive thought patterns we're having, we try to change that narrative and reduce our anxiety, right? Okay, anything else on zones? Speaking of children, hi. Okay, so we're in an age of distance learning for the moment, at least. So I wanted to at least briefly talk about what it looks like with distance learning. So we're obviously a little bit more limited in what we can do when we're not in the physical space with the kids. I can't hand somebody a fidget when I'm talking to them on a Zoom screen, right? But there are a number of things that I can do. You want to control the virtual environment as well as you can. We all have different levels of this, but with Zoom, which gives you some tools for doing that, right? Number one, use the mute function. You probably have figured some of this out already, but it's worth repeating here. Using the mute function, especially during singing, to reduce auditory stimulation, right? When you get a group like this, especially if we were all 4-year-olds, right? There's going to be a lot of talking, yelling, activity, right? Which is going to be hard to follow for anybody. And for someone who gets overwhelmed with that kind of stuff, it might just be impossible. When you try to sing on Zoom together, because of the delay that people get, it's cacophony, right? And nothing goes together, it's chaos, right? So the way that singing works, as sad as it is, best is to mute everyone except the singer, right? And then you can't, unless you've got people on their phones with audio on their phones, that's the other way of doing it. Having audio on your phone, there's no delay, but if your audio is through Zoom, there is. That's the way that you do it. So you use the mute function to reduce how much auditory stimulation there is, because it can be overwhelming, right? Another thing that we can do. Yeah. No problem. Take your time, Rebecca. When you got to go, you can go. Water play is great. She looked like she was ready for sure. Okay. Next, suggest the kids use speaker view, not gallery view, to reduce visual stimulation, right? So gallery view is when you can see everybody at once. And then if everyone's moving and coming in and out and moving around the screen and blah, 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 it's a little bit crazy. Speaker view gives you the main person who's talking. The problem with it is that it will go to whoever's being the loudest at that time. So it can be equally chaotic. So what you do is you pin one of the videos, right? So you can pin a particular video so that everybody is seeing that one video. Okay, even though other people might be talking, you just see the teacher's face. And when it's time for the next teacher, if you're doing it with multiple teachers together, then you pin them. So there's a way to do that. If anyone needs help how to do it, I can show you later. But we don't have the time for it now, but reach out and I'm happy to show you how to do it. But that will reduce more visual stimulation. Also, reduce or eliminate the use of virtual backgrounds. This is specifically for older kids. We have people that work with different age kids on this call. Preschoolers, it's not as much of an issue because they don't know how to do it. But even my 9-year-old has become expert at it. And kids will constantly change their backgrounds and constantly do effects, right? And you, as the host of the meeting, can either make people not do it, right? You can allow people not to change their background, or you can try to reduce it, where you give everybody a minute to do it for a moment, and then after everyone's got a background they're happy with, you stop it so they don't do it more, right? And you can do the same thing, I think, with those like Snapchat effects that some people like to use, because that creates a really chaotic visual environment. So that's another thing you can do. Also incorporating in your teaching and your lessons that you're doing with your kids, incorporating sensory activities that are easily created or used at home. So Play-Doh, people often have Play-Doh. If not, it's very easy to make. Flour, water, and cream of tartar, that's it. There's also gluten-free versions for people that are gluten-free. Oobleck is a mixture of cornstarch and water. It's the coolest stuff in the world. If you don't know what it is, when it's in the bowl, it's solid. You kind of pick it up and it's really solid and sticky, and then it melts and comes back in the liquid. It's awesome, right? So it's really easy. It's literally like cornstarch. It's like 2 parts cornstarch to 1 part water or something.
Yeah.
There's a million recipes online. That's an easy thing for people to put together. It's an easy thing to play with during a service. It is a little messy in the making of it. So one thing to give your parents a heads up about. Shaving cream play, same. Shaving cream on a cookie sheet. That's you can draw on it, run your hands through it. Really great sensory activity, right? So those are things as you're thinking about what you're going to do today, tomorrow, whenever, you can add some of those things in. Okay, that brings us to group work, unless anyone has questions about any of that. What time is it? Okay, we got about 15 minutes. So we'll do this briefly and then we'll come up to finish up. Anyone have any questions about anything so far? Okay. So I'm just going to show you what this is. So we're going to do what's called a sensory challenges action plan. So I'm guessing while we have talked about this, you're all thinking of particular kids. What I'm going to do in a moment is share a Google Doc with you that is basically this sheet that I'm showing you now on my screen. It's a thing that says sensory challenges action plan at the top. You don't have to write the student or the class right now, but you can if you want to. It's something you can use now or use later, and it can be for virtual or in-person learning, right? So you can think about it in a situation we're all in right now, or in the situation that we will hopefully all be back in by the fall, right? Being back in the classroom with the kids. So when you have this particular kid in mind, we'll do it in groups so you can think about it and share, right? Or you can all kind of, cooperate together. What is or are the main sensory needs that you observe in this child, the child that you're thinking about? What are the main needs? What are 3 specific solutions to those needs, right? So when you're thinking about those needs, after what we've talked about today or what you already know, would you give them the fidget? Would you reduce visual clutter in the classroom? Would you Zoom? Would you give them headphones? What are 3 specific things that you think you could do to meet those needs, either now virtually or in real life when we're all back together again? And what is or are the first steps needed to implement each solution? Is there a parent call that would have to happen? Do you have to talk to your director? Do you have to talk to your co-teachers? Do you have to buy a fidget? Right? What are the things you need to do? So what we're going to do is I'm going to split you up into groups using the breakout room function. I'm just going to kind of do it randomly because there are a lot of us, and I'm not sure I'll be able to meaningfully put people into groups. So I'm going to stop my share for a moment. And I'm just going to have us go randomly, which might mean that we have preschool teachers mixed in with Hebrew tutors in private practice, mixed in with a private floor-time practitioner, right? Whatever it might be. Whatever your group is, I'm going to put this link in the chat. If you give me 1 second. Here it comes. You should all be able to open it. Well, before I divide you up, everyone click on that link and make sure that it works and that you can type on it. I'm going to open it on my computer too.
Where is this link, David?
I just put it in the chat box. So if you don't see the chat, down at the bottom, there should be a little speech bubble. Oh, oops, it went privately. Sorry. Priscilla got it. No one else got it. Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
Got it.
There it is. Sorry about that. Okay, so make sure that works. I think I set it so that everybody with the link can use this.
It says I need permission. Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same.
It does.
Mine's not even opening. I'm using my phone though, so I don't know.
In Google Drive, you can change the permissions that anybody with the link can open it.
That's what I thought I did.
Oh.
Let me just double check.
Then that's the extent of my help.
Hold on. Let's see what happens if I open it. Oh yeah, I'm getting a bunch of give me permission, give me permission. Sorry, I thought I did that. All right. Hold on.
David, on my computer, my other Gmail account is trying to open it. So you might have given me permission at a different account. Maybe that's one of our problems. Or for some of us, that could be the problem.
Okay, I'm gonna just see if I can adjust this again right now. I've got this opened.
Nice work. Jonah's calling.
Okay, I see what happened. Oh, somehow I thought I fixed this. Okay, hold on. I think I'm gonna, I think this should fix it now. Hold on. Anyone, no sign in required, can comment. Okay, I'm hitting save. Close it and try to reopen it now and see if it works.
Yay, found it.
Did it work that time?
Oh.
Just close and reopen. Is it working?
Now for me.
Yeah?
Yes. It just
Okay,
has
good.
an action plan, right?
Somehow essentially, yeah, that's it. It looks just like what I showed you before. But
It's mine. Mine's working.
Good. Yeah, I think somehow it reverted back to anyone at Jewish Learning Works with the link can do stuff, and none of you are from Jewish Learning Works. But now it's anyone with the link. Okay, so you've all got that. So what we're going to do is we're going to divide you into groups, and I just want you to take a few minutes to talk about those 3 questions. If it's helpful to write it down on the sheet, go ahead. I think probably each group, because I'm realizing now I only made 1 copy of it. If you want to do that, just kind of just kind of highlight the whole text. Control C or Command C, and go down to the next page and Command V it for your own group, and then you'll be able to write on it, or you can just talk about it. You don't have to write it down. But I'll send this to you later so you can use it yourselves. Okay? So I'm going to put you into breakout groups, and oh, wait a minute. What is happening here? Hold on. All right. Well. I think hold on, because it wasn't letting me. Seems like breakout rooms are not. This is a new account that we got. All right, well, okay, I tell you what. We're just gonna have to do this as a group. Sorry, everybody, because the breakout rooms are somehow not enabled. If everybody can see it on their screen, I can also share it again on mine. That way we can all look at it together. We can just talk about it. Sorry, everybody. Apologies.
I just want to go to my channel.
Yeah, I'm gonna share this. Okay, I'm gonna share this in Word. Okay, so everybody should see this now. So we'll just do this as a group exercise. We're only 10 minutes out from ending anyway, so it's probably just as well. So let's think of one kid. Somebody out here in the group, tell us one kid that you're thinking about and what the main sensory needs are. Who would like to? Who has a kid in mind already?
Okay, let me get back to the screen. Right there. Okay. Trying to see.
Can everybody see the action plan on my screen now? Yeah? Okay, so anyone got a kid they're thinking of? With a sensory need? We could also just go to general questions if that's more helpful for you. Rather do that? All right, let's just do that. I'll send this to you later for you to think about, and I can talk with you about later about it, because we're running short on time anyway because of my technical difficulties. Again, my apologies. Okay, so we're just gonna we'll just go to questions. We'll just do kind of problem solving and question answer for now. Who would like to ask a question about anything?
If you had a child that you are showing sensory processing, showing something with sensory processing, and you want to point the grown-ups of this child to a resource that they should look at, what would you point them to?
I would for parents, I would
Yeah.
point them, if they're open to thinking about it, I would point them to the Sensational Kids book.
Sensational Kids? Okay.
Yeah. It's a good book for parents. It's straightforward. It's easy to get through. And it's a lot less technical than the Out of Sync Child, which is also a great book. But I find Sensational Kids to be a little bit more user-friendly. And then the other place that the other resource that I would send them is occupational therapists. So if they want to get an assessment, right? There are a lot of OTs, who can help. Actually, once our new website launches, there's a whole resource guide that I put together, in part so that it would be there for after I'm not here anymore, where there's all different categories of types of intervention or support people might need, and it's also broken out by region. So you'll be able to go to that resource guide and click on occupational therapy and click on East Bay, San Francisco Peninsula, or Marin, North Bay, I think it says, not Marin, because it goes up to Sonoma County too. And there's lists of OTs who I know or have become familiar with over the years. So that will be a good resource for people. Parents are also welcome to reach out to me. I mean, if these are parents that you're talking about this with now, like between now and May for whatever reason, certainly you can send them my way, because we also do offer this direct parent support, and all this distance support that we're doing is free too. But if they want to learn about it, Sensational Kids. If they want an assessment, it's occupational therapy. And depending on where they live and what they're looking for, there's lots of different recommendations that will be in the resource guide, which it should be available in the next week or two. But certainly if you need OT recommendations for a family you're working with and our resource guide is not up yet, which I'll just ask me and I'll give you some. Or has a parent, ask me.
Thank you.
That's where I'd start. Anybody else?
I was just gonna say, David, I think it's difficult because I'm thinking of a child in like the same children at school versus like on Zoom. And then so I'm having a difficult time because the challenges are so different.
They are.
And then the ones I'm thinking about from home, it's like a lot of the things that we're doing on Zoom, we may or may not be able to have control over because it's like the parents' involvement that is making it worse.
Yes, it's no question harder doing it this way, because you just have you have much less control, and there's very little you can do, when you're not there. And sometimes the parents coming in do kind of do more harm than good, right? So I mean, I think, if the parent talking at the same time as the teacher giving instructions while the teacher is also giving instructions and all that other stuff is too much for this particular kid you might be thinking about, or the parent is being too pushy or being too directive, and that's overwhelming, and the kid is like getting anxious, right? That's a thing that I would probably raise. I would raise it in a way with the parents that is not blaming, right? Because they're just trying to help, right? Especially now. And we're all, anybody who's a parent of a young kid right now, especially if they're working too, or even if they're not working, is stretched way thinner than normal. And preschool parents, in general, are the most anxious, high-strung people on the planet, right? Just because it's their little babies going out into the world, and if it's their first, especially, you're so freaked out about everything. But you're also tired, right? They need a lot of care. They're not super self-sufficient, right? So understand that they're coming from a place of I'm feeling overwhelmed myself. My kid is not responding, and I really want them to because I need them to, because I need to have 20 minutes to do this thing, and so all that is going on, and they are probably just trying to help. But if it's overwhelming to their child, that's the thing that I would talk to them and say, hey, I've been noticing when we're on our Zoom calls, we're giving instructions and you're often repeating them, and or doing it for the kid, and when it's a little bit different than the style that we usually do in class, and it seems like it's a little bit overwhelming for him or for her. Is there a way that you could maybe be nearby, and not necessarily so hands-on, but in a place where if they need you, you're there, and that might be 10 feet away out of view of the camera, or that might be just in the next room, right?
The one I'm thinking of, it's literally like if there's two parents I'm thinking of, and it's literally if they just were there but didn't say anything and gave the child more time to think about and process what we're asking, then it would totally be fine.
Yes, that's another thing.
All over them.
Yeah, you could say we want to try some, we want to kind of, we're trying to sort of, simulate the classroom environment as much as we can in this very different time. And we don't give the kids a lot of, prompting and direction. Like we ask them something, we give them the provocation, or we ask the question, or whatever it is. And then we give them time. And I think that actually it might be really helpful if you could just give her time, or give him a little bit of time. And I would also acknowledge that time feels really long. Like we educators are uncomfortable with silence, parents are even more uncomfortable with silence, right? If they're asking their kid to do something and it's not happening. I mean, I even do it myself. I'll ask my daughter a question and she won't answer in the first 2 seconds. I'm like, yell it, hey, hello, right? Did you hear me, right? Which is exactly what I tell parents not to do, right? But because I myself am also a little bit, stressed out, and right, I think we all are to varying degrees. I would, let them know that it might feel really weird to just be quiet. 10 seconds of silence is very strange, if you're not used to 10 seconds of silence, right? And if you don't have 12 other kids in the circle who might fill that silence, right? Because it's just you and your kid there, especially if everyone else is muted, right? Or whatever it might be that's going on in the moment, right? So I would just come at it that way and say, I know it might be weird, it's gonna be a totally weird thing I'm gonna ask you to do, but I just wanna try it and see how it goes, right? Not you're being a bad parent, not get off their back, none of that stuff that's gonna feel blaming or shaming, because they're probably feeling all that already. In all the ways that they're failing to do all the things that they were hoping to do. All right, thanks Natalie.
Hi, David.
Yes, Harriet.
Yeah, I wanted to add two things. In a way, this Zoom for me is advantageous because I've had a very difficult child in my class, constantly talking, constantly moving. So I did about 4 lessons on Zoom, pre-Pesach lessons. And the kids were, I guess, in their bedrooms. And I don't know whether this kid had one of these Pilates balls or maybe he was on his bed. He was jumping up and down all the time. However, he was not disruptive because there were other children and he was not in the same room as the other children. And so he was learning. And if I asked a question, he raised his hand. And there was another kid who I think was also jumping up and down on his bed.
Yeah.
So I think when you see kids like in a classroom, it's disruptive. But if they're moving around or jumping, it doesn't mean that they're not learning.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that is sort of that's the sort of blessing of this time, is that distraction factor. When you can mute kids, that goes away, right? People can kind of do their own thing, but there's pluses and minuses, right? Like at the same time, you're missing out on interaction and you're not engaging in the same way. But yes, if you're trying to do a group thing and you have one kid who's always distracting, they will be less distracting on Zoom because they will just do their own thing.
Maybe an advantage.
Any other questions before we close? Because we are at 3:30 and I want to be respectful. Okay, I always end all of my talks, you've all seen this before, with this quote. It just speaks to me of everything that we've been doing here today. Educate a child according to their way. Also, when they grow old, they will not stray from it, right? With sensory stuff, it's even more true than anything else, right? We got to figure out what's going on sensory for that kid and make that move, or they will never learn anything, and we will all just end up getting frustrated, including them, right? So I think it's really critical. You do have my email and my phone number. I think you'll have my email anyway because I've been emailing you. But certainly do feel free to reach out. I will send you these slides. I will also send you the link to the evaluation, which I will also put in the chat box right now in case anybody has a minute and wants to fill it out now. It really is very short. And it's the same one that you have likely filled out before after each one of these things, if you have done that for us. And it really does help us a lot. So here is the evaluation. I will put it in the email that I send as well. But if anyone has time to do it now, so much the better. Other than that, thank you all very much. I hope you are all staying healthy and safe and hanging in there. And may we all get through this easily and quickly and be back to normal sooner rather than later. If anyone has any last minute questions that they don't want to bring up with the group, I can stick around for a couple of minutes. Other than that, everyone needs to go. Thank you so much. It was great to see you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, David.
All right.
Bye.
Have a great afternoon, everyone.